Before we begin, I'd just like to say thank you to my friends at Hair Saloon for supporting this podcast and for providing space at their corporate offices to record it. Hair Saloon's mission has as much to do with the restoration of men as it does with the business of hair cutting. They try to make a difference in the lives of the thousands of men who come through their doors each week. Hair Saloon is based in St. Louis, Missouri, and if you've ever been interested in running your own business and want to work with great people, I would highly recommend you check out the Hair Saloon franchise opportunity. Go to hairsaloonfranchise.com to find out more information. That's hairsaloonfranchise.com. Also, quick reminder to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, and to please take 2 minutes to give us your review. And if you have a question or comment you'd like to share with our listeners, go to Suzanne at thesuzannevenkershow.com. Welcome back to the Suzanne Venker Show. I'm your host, Suzanne Venker, and I am here, as always, with Andre Paradis to hash out all of the problems between men and women. Is that right, Andre?
Yes, sister. Good Lord.
I mean, seriously, it's never been, I mean, of course, it's always been a thing, but it's really a thing today. There's just so much to deal with. And we left off last week where I didn't get a chance to talk or to read an email. Well, the crux of last week was about raising kids differently, right?
Yeah.
Boys and girls.
Boys and girls, the dynamic with father, daughter, mother, son.
Yeah.
You know, role modeling after the same sex, but then the opposite was really your first love affair, love story.
Yes, right.
Love. Yeah.
And so many of these, I don't know, narratives, paradigms, whatever you want to call them, do get sort of solidified early on with what we see in our parents. Mm-hmm. And this question from a gentleman named Jonathan was trying to reconcile what he thought he was hearing was two different ideas between two of my podcasts. One that I did with that G.S. Youngblood that I told you about, who wrote The Masculine in Relationship, and then one of, I don't know, something else I said at some other time. So he asked me basically, I'm trying to reconcile these two ideas. On the one hand is the concept of the husband wanting his wife to be happy. Mm-hmm. And on the other is what I got from G.S. Youngblood's talk, where the goal of pleasing your wife is just a short-term fix, but that pleasing is not the road to happiness for her, but real masculine leadership, according to his blueprint, which is true. The first approach seems more like the goal for the husband is to do what it takes to keep his wife happy based on what she says she wants. And his approach is more like that the goal for the husband is not necessarily giving her what she says she wants, but just simply being a strong masculine person. And he's asking me, does this seem at all contradictory? And I kind of understand what he's asking. Are the wives more interested in the husband that seeks to please her and make her happy and sometimes move mountains, or the one in touch with his masculine core, or both? That's basically his question.
Boom.
Yeah, so I thought that I knew exactly what he meant in saying how that seems like that would be contradictory. Uh-huh. What's your first reaction to that?
Well, God, it's the mixture, right? That's interesting. Because a man who's completely masculine, 100% masculine, machismo, bulldog, and lacks the sensitivities to be able to be in a relationship with a woman, that's going to be a problem, right? We know these guys exist. On the flip side, a guy who's too sensitive, too aware, too present, too giving, right? Typically, there's such a coming from their feminine first, or leading with their feminine, as sweet as it is, and as most women say, they want that soft, sweet, sensitive guy to be able to emotionally connect with. We know that ultimately they don't feel safe with those guys. They don't feel safe, and if a woman doesn't feel safe, you're done, right? It's over. It's going to fall apart. So the mixture, the dynamic, the both is what's appropriate in a love relationship that goes. If a woman doesn't feel safe, she knows deep down that he can't protect her, and that makes her really, really anxious. And will go after him, trying to get him to step up. And as she constantly loses respect, the more he gives, the more she fails. So
this is actually going to lead in really well to the topic we're going to talk about today. But before we get to that, I'm envisioning a man here. I know what you mean exactly. I'm picturing the average guy going, well, what does that look like in real life, and how would I know when to step up and when to step back, or what does that look like? Like I can see him just being confused by that.
Well, as a guy, you have to, what I call it is something that I heard from Alison Armstrong, actually. Is men are internally motivated, women are externally motivated. For us, is what we value for ourselves in the realm of our lives, and what we step into the world as, contributing,
competent,
like
strong, knowing what
all
you
that
want.
stuff.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So that makes a solid guy. And within that, he's able to financially and emotionally be able to take care of a family and a wife.
Mm-hmm.
You see. So the guy has to have his mojo together, his life together. He has his character build. Something we started when we were young boys. Build your character, become the guy you want to be. So you feel respected. Not only you have self-respect, but you can feel respected by the world and people. And that you have the mojo to take care of a wife and kids, and kind of build up your life into what it is that you want. So when that part is missing, then all of a sudden he's more interested in being a pleaser, right, which is more feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, again, it's the same thing. When you're overly pleasing and pleasant, a woman not necessarily feels your strength, and women instinctively respond to strength in men, like capabilities, right? Power as in like having having options and resources, whether it's money or brute strength, right? So women respond to that, feel safe and relax. So when he's too much acquiescing to her, she doesn't feel safe and pretty much becomes mother. And now we have a real problem.
Yeah, a real problem. So then the answer, I think, for this gentleman would be a mixture. That it's not that they're contradictory. It's that you can be, as a man, concerning about your wife's needs, as you should, as that's the marriage, that's how it works, or relationship. But you do it within the context of strength rather than passivity or being conciliatory all the time. So there's a way to do that. There's a way to do that. Can you think of like an example? I don't know, just a silly example on a given day where you and your wife what would that look like with you and your wife?
Well, the only thing that I come up with, it's and it's going to sound terrible, but it's not. It's be able to say no when no is appropriate. Do you know what I mean? That's it.
Yeah.
Right. So I get to be the rock, and I have to have there's reasons for it, and that's it. So. At one point, with something going on with my son, he was little. She was completely overwhelmed. She came home, and he sort of went after her for something. And she was really edgy and angry, and she was going to, react and take it all over him, which she was 9 years old, didn't really know, that what he was doing was adding to her stress in that moment when she walked into the house. Right. So I saw her, like the body reaction, like, you know what I mean? And she's like, takes him outside to like handle him. Well, he had no idea what was going on, and he was just being a 9-year-old asking for something. So I went outside, and I said, no. So I told him to go inside, and we had a conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'm the one who ended up dealing with the stress and the overwhelm that was going on. She didn't get to throw it all over him, even though he kind of pushed the button, if you make sense. So you'd have to step in appropriately, with sensitivities, but you got to be the rock. And in that, a woman surrenders and feels safe. And all of a sudden, like, I, in a sense, rescued her in that moment from all that crap that was about to explode. I rescued her. I took it off of her.
Yeah. And that's And that's, the concept of no is, I think, a really, really hard one for people in general. But I would say for today's modern woman, especially, who earns her own money and does her own thing and is used to calling her own shots. And then all of a sudden, if you're married, so I'm just going to give you a great example from my own marriage recently that's money related. I went to look at a car. The car that I have is 5 years old, and I'm moving out of SUV mode into regular car mode because I'm almost an empty nester, and I want to not feel like a mom all the time anymore. So I was looking at this car just for fun, and I actually brought my son with me, and my husband was out of town. And seriously, just for fun, because it was this great deal. from CarMax. Here's a nice plug, even though they don't pay me to make an ad for them, but CarMax, go CarMax. We get all our cars from CarMax. So it was just a great deal. And I just wanted to go drive around and see what it felt like to be in a car after 20 years of being in an SUV. And it really was a good deal, and it was affordable. But so I kind of later told him about it. And long story short, he nixed it. And had to take me down off my temporary, high on this. And I'm so glad he did, because we ended up really needing this cash for other more parenting related things. Parenting. It just never ends. And when am I going to get my car and just forget about my kids? So anyway, right, exactly. My time will come. We got to get them through and out of college. So he ended up being right. And I did listen to him. Actually, it was all fine, but I could see myself 10 years ago, really, the old me would have fought him, and not fought him and I never would have done anything without his, agreement, or been difficult about it. But what I did used to do is sort of gently wear him down, if you know what I mean.
That sounds like a woman.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Like I didn't, like I see it now so clearly, but I used to, a lot of times if he didn't want what I wanted, I would just gently wear him down, not be nasty or mean, never go out and do anything and undermine him, nothing like that. Just gently wear him down. And I no longer do that anymore, because I realize now that that's an inappropriate way of using his maleness, against him in my favor. Right. Because, of course, ultimately, men do want you to be happy. But if it's not realistic or practical, he should overrule that feeling of wanting to make you happy. And I think that's just a great example of what goes on in many modern relationships today, relationships in general, but especially modern relationships, where do you give and where do you learn to say no, and how do you listen to that and say, well, maybe he or she is onto something. When and I don't want to say she, I want to focus this on men, because it's really I think an issue for men being able to say no today and feeling okay about that, and that's not holding a woman back because you say no.
Well. And I'm going to say, especially in a relationship, long-term relationship, marriage, the man, I know for myself, I'm the one bringing most of the money. She has her dream life and she has her part-time job, and all that stuff is good for her soul because she lives a dream. But I'm the one with the 12-hour day.
Right.
I'm the one with 12-hour days, right? So I think the cocktail is beautiful. The mix is perfect. It allows her to be living her dream with passion and be feminine as I go and kill myself. And I love it because it makes me feel like a dude. I love it. I do. Yeah. I love the fact that
Same.
I could produce these results, and I come home at 7:00 at night in the summer, and the kids are in the pool playing with their friends. I love that. I did that, with her, but I'm the bigger machine, if you want, that way. But the idea of and this is where the dance comes in. Who's accountable for what? So if I make most of the money, and then the money has to go in places where it has to be, and then we're allowed, I'm accountable for our future, which is always on the radar, not today, not next week, our future. Where's the money going? What are we spending that we end up with enough in the future? So if you want an expense that's beautifully, we could afford it, but it's crazy, it's going to ruin the back end of what we're saving for like the retirement plan. Well, it's a no. Now, as a woman, like you've been a hero, but like, okay, so you have the conversation, the no is because, look, this is what it's going to cost us in the end. Like, the money's not going to get invested, but so there's a bunch of reasons. Accountable for our safety, again, is usually a male's point of view. And in that, you'll get deleted. Your ideas will get vetoed. Yeah. Just because it's going to ruin the plan.
And of course, not to get too much off this, because I want to get onto our topic, which we still have yet to do. But just really quickly, because there's so many women breadwinners today, that's flipped on its head, where she's going to be telling him no, and that's a whole big problem of its own, because we are not interchangeable, obviously. So when a woman tells a man no, and she's the one who's in charge, that's why that whole female breadwinning thing becomes so dicey, which people don't understand, because they think, well, why does it matter? Whoever's making most should be able to say that final no. Well, no, that gets very tricky when you're talking about a woman telling a man no. That's a whole nother.
Right. Again, you become his you become his mother,
Mm-hmm.
and that ruins the entire dynamic of the relationship.
Yeah.
Motherhood and man is something that is inappropriate as an adult. So adult male who allow you to mother them because you take over because somehow you make the money or you're in charge or whatever, you eventually, I see this all the time,
Yep.
it's a 10-year disaster in the making. Eventually you will lose respect for him as his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Your sensual dynamic is down the toilet.
Yep.
And you either end up having an affair or he does. It ruins everything. So is that worth it? That's what I'm saying. Again, my job to blow the whistle.
Yep.
Is this worth it? To take on the reins, be the masculine, and decide that that's better because it makes you feel like a badass. However, what's the price you're willing to pay? And I'm not saying anything else, but that's typically what happens.
Yes.
Some people are making it happen, but typically it's a disaster. So let's look out for it.
Yeah. I mean, we see it all the time. We're the ones receiving the calls. We're the ones doing the coaching with the reversed roles that are not working. So, okay, to get more to the subject at hand, what I wanted to talk about today was how feminism has affected men to the degree that they too are rejecting sex roles or conventional sex roles. And I have an email from someone who asked a question about this. And what we've been talking about kind of leads perfectly into this, because I think this is a huge problem that is never discussed. This is from Tabitha, and she asked, love to read your thoughts on how feminism has affected men in such a way that they are rejecting traditional roles. She was married twice, and in both, she did not have children, so she was working, of course, and the lure of that dual income became increasingly more enticing to both of these former husbands. And then she goes on to explain how feminism doesn't speak for her. She's now in her late 40s, single with no children. It's a terrible place to be. And no one's fighting for my right to or desire to have a traditional family, because it's all about flipping the roles. Right. So, but specifically, she's right, and I don't talk enough about it, about the reality that so many men have jumped on board. And now, where it used to be, ain't no wife of mine going to work kind of thing, which I think was very misunderstood, because I think that had a lot to do with his pride and his wanting to feel like the man, and I get that. To now expecting their wives to work and completely mapping out a life with her in advance with the assumption that both of them are going to be at the workforce at all times. And of course, the blank hits the fan once the kids come along, and all that kind of goes out the door. But at any rate, it is true that men have just been just as affected by this narrative as women have, and now reject them to the point where they're, taking part in their own disempowerment, not realizing that it's going to come back to bite them in the, which it usually does.
It's straight up.
Yeah. So I read this story yesterday about this Lawrence Fox, a British actor, who has come under fire for a couple things, but this one in particular that interested me was that he's actually a divorced father of two. He's 41, and he's dating, and he's now refusing to date any woman under 35 because they're all quote unquote woke, and they think they're oppressed by men. And he gives this story about having been with this girl who essentially was trying to tell him that he needed to support Christine Ford in that case with Kavanaugh, and just because she's a woman. And he pushed back on that and basically said, this isn't going to work, see ya. Now, I'm sure it was more than one thing, but the point was the whole point of the story is that he recognized that he was with basically a very feminist-minded woman, and he went running, rightfully so, and smart him.
Good man.
But yeah, how many men are not doing that? That's the first thing I thought of when I saw this. The reason why his story became such a thing is because that was so ballsy and smart and different and bold, when most men of his generation, from what I can see, just simply say nothing when they see this. Either they've jumped on board too, and they believe that, or they don't, and they just shut up because they are, as I said before, taking part in their own disempowerment where they have no voice. This is a major, major problem in modern relationships today.
Well, this is society falling apart.
For
Right?
sure.
We dismantle the natural ways. Natural ways. You could fight nature all you want. Guess what? It's going to win, and you're going to lose. In
Yep.
the way that we function best. Period. So, I see it all over the place. If you're going to be an ass about it, we call them manginas. Men who basically embrace the idea. Get this, how ridiculous. The idea that women are oppressed, that the patriarchy is really what's the problem, that, all of the evil in the world has been done by males and men and wars and battles, right? And wait, whoa. Yeah, well, men battle and fight, go to war to protect their family, their country, right? Like, not because they want to go die, right? There's usually, it's beyond the fact that we're just, aggressive. We're aggressive when it needs to be. Things have to be protected. The rest of it is moving, everything. And I love this part, but like everything, the chair that you're sitting on was made by a guy, invented by a guy. The computers, the cars, the automobile, air conditioning, the fact that you're comfortable right now was invented by men. Everything around you, walls, as in like for the house that keep you safe at night so you don't get eaten by the bear, was invented by men. Men invented everything. We also invented washing machines and
modern conveniences.
Dishwasher.
Yeah.
Because we want to free you from the burden of having so much to do, because when you're freed, you're available to us better, and right. So come on,
it's the complete opposite of what they think.
It's complete opposite.
Do you think it's just a matter of, like I've argued for women, that they just simply haven't been told this stuff, because who the hell's going to tell them that, because they're surrounded by feminists all the time? Or I kind of have this theory that men who are more likely to jump on board with that and I don't know, I guess be brainwashed or conditioned in that direction, even though it's the wrong direction because it's false information, has to do with their own upbringing. What you see growing up, I think, is so dramatic in terms of what you decide in your mind you want for yourself down the road. So, but a lot of times what we see as children isn't really accurate. We just see it through child's eyes, so we can't really make heads or tails of our parents' relationship, unless it's really bad and obviously dysfunctional. But I mean, just in terms of a general dynamic, and you think you want a certain thing, and so you jump on board because it fits that already preconceived narrative. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Does your marriage or love life feel hard? I get a lot of emails from readers who are struggling in their relationships. Unfortunately, the help an individual or couple needs can rarely be answered in a series of back-and-forth emails. For this reason, I offer coaching for individuals who are struggling in their relationships and for couples whose marriages feel stuck. Just go to SuzanneVenker.com and click on Coaching at the top to sign up for a session with me. That's SuzanneVenker.com.
Tell you a little story. I hold these events where we put men and women in a room together every few months, and we have a discussion about all of this, right? Like what works, what doesn't work, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, what's it like for a guy's point of view in this new culture of, we don't need no man, where's my man? We don't need no man, where's my man, right? The instinct to bond with a man, to feel safe, with the brain training that says we don't need no man, right? Like there's a lot of confusion for women, there's a lot of confusion for men. So anyway, we have these open discussions, which is really fantastic. We always discover something. And there was this new couple that joined. This is recently. There's always more women than men. That's normal. Mm-hmm. But this guy introduced himself as, his wife's husband. And the story was that she's so impressed with him. He's so supportive. He's so amazing. He's such a good, caretaker, blah, blah, blah. And the story came down that he was raised by a single mom. So, even though he looks like a man, he's got a beard and all that crap, he's actually he's super feminine in the sense that his job is to just like support her.
Caretake.
So caretake. Mm-hmm. So she's going to school full time, in I think a law firm, I believe, something like really high stressed. So she's still training and she has a job in between. He works very little. But he's so loving. He's so fantastic. He makes my sandwiches before I go to school in the morning, and he makes sure that I come home, the dinner's ready, all that stuff. And I'm like, exactly flip the script. As she's telling us this, she's like, like barely 30 years old. You can see the wear on her face. And he's sitting there glowing like a girl next to her. And he's like, yeah, my mother trained me to really be gentle and kind and caring and loving. And he's the girl and she's the boy. So we took the same exact dynamic. She's killing herself and he's supporting her, making sandwiches and making sure she's comfortable when she comes home after a badass day. But you can see his killing her and he's just happy just to groove. Single mom on his side and then single mom on her side who taught her to be a badass and go after the world. And, man, but so it's gonna explode.
Yeah.
I saw it. It's gonna explode, right? It's not gonna be sustainable.
So that's a great example because obviously you're going to walk into the world with coming off the tail end of whatever you saw for 18 years, right? And whatever you were taught. And so I think about this because I look at the younger generation who are struggling so much, and the majority I can't figure out whether the reasoning has more to do with upbringing or just not wanting to bulk the culture because they're too young to really do that because everybody likes to go along to get along. But it doesn't really matter in the end, I guess. Why, I guess, although it does in a way because you can at least teach parents how not to send those wrong messages, and that's a lot easier to do than trying to change the culture.
Right.
But either which way, it's a major problem that men and boys have jumped on board with this message in addition to the women. It was one thing when just women were doing this from the 1970s to 2000. In the last 20 years, men are right there with them, especially millennial men. And they do not see what is going to come down the pike. They just have no clue. And it breaks my heart and I want to tell them, but they think they're so woke. They're so proud of being this equality guy. And they're setting themselves up for disaster.
Yeah, I protect my woman. I'm the one who really supports her in doing all,
Which taps into a real, genuine, natural human, male need. That's real, that part.
But instead of protecting them, they're like supporting them.
Yes.
It's up to her to provide and do everything. And again, you're going against nature. That's fine. You'll do it for a while, and it'll stop.
And and it'll clash, and can get so bad that you're almost what's that word? Institutionalized in a way. Because I have an ongoing, I wouldn't call her a client, but a gal who's been emailing me for years about her relationship with her husband, and I've written about her in my books, and she is the breadwinner, very unhappily so. 2 kids in Colorado, and her husband just picks up here and there odd jobs, and she recognizes that she chose him from the get-go, but that he was employed full-time at the time. It's kind of a long story, but the point is she's finally excited because she's gotten a job within a school system that will allow her to be home with her kids more and see them more and be more present. She's really excited about that. And bringing that to his attention, he was angry and mad. Yep. He's gotten so used to the full-time, well, I guess it's still full-time, but maybe the money's less or something. I don't know. But whatever, he doesn't want her there at home at all. I mean, it's just so bad. They are so miserable and waiting to the day when the kids leave so they can, I'm sure, part ways, which they will. Or she will. Yeah,
he's more busy wanting to be comfortable.
Yes, and which goes back to what we were talking about that last week.
Right. That's what men love to provide for women, because the more comfortable she is in her surrounding, in her household, and everything she needs to get everything done for the back end of the family, right? The more comfortable she's in that, the better she is altogether for everyone. The light, the connection, the glow, the feminine, sex, all of it, right? So a woman who works less is more available to be connecting and connected to everyone around her. That's the point. That's what we need from you. That's what works. Flip the script. When the woman is burnt out, anxious, worn down, where is she? Right? Everybody loses that part of her. Like she can't connect to her husband, she can't connect to her kids, she can't connect to her job, she can't connect to people at work. She's inside out. And I hear this all the time, women who seem to have it all telling me that somehow they feel something is wrong because they're completely feeling numb and disconnected from their own hearts. I'm like, well, you're burnt out. You're living like a man, and long term on a woman's body. Yep. It stops. It kills you. It won't work anymore.
I'm wondering if, it seems to me that getting men to understand that if they want more sex, which, hello, what man doesn't want more sex, right? they're never going to get it going about it in the way they are if they jump on board with this. So and we can talk about this. Maybe that's the topic for next week, is understanding the difference between a man's sex drive and a woman's, and that women need to be relaxed. They need the romance. They need all this stuff to allow sex to take place. And with what you've just described, that lifestyle is never going to make that happen. So if you're a guy who jumps on board with the rah, 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 go be the breadwinner and take care of everything, you're never going to get laid. Let's just face it. So because that's not how women work. They cannot come home at the end of the day and go have sex with you when they've exhausted their resources. Whereas when this is a great example that I think is always really hits at home. If a woman came home from a long day of work and a man said, "Come on, I want to get it on," she's going to look at him like, "How dare you ask me to do that after I've been," right? But if you reverse that, he's like, "All right, let's go," right?
Let's go.
Because it's going to relax him because he's made differently, and he's not going to need all that, he doesn't need exactly what women need in order to be able to do it. So that understanding is never, it's so clear, I think, but it's not ever explained how, and we don't have to get into that now. We can really, seriously, we could spend a whole podcast episode on that. But I just thought about that when you were talking about.
That's actually a really great topic for next show, because it's, chemically we're built different, sustain, the kind of push because we have the testosterone that you don't have, so there's a whole bunch of reasons why that works this way, right? And it's, again, for sex, if you're gonna chop it down to like the bare, like essential, for male, sex is the reward for working all day.
Yeah.
At the end of a long day, he wants to like some sensuality, sexuality.
No woman's gonna say that. Sorry.
That's the reward, right? That's the point. That's part of why he provides everything and works so hard and makes sure she's comfortable. That's sort of the gift, right? Like, so flip that. It doesn't do the same on the woman, and a guy who's been home all day spooning the dog, also can't get it up because he's such a passive, flat, and again, if I'm going to say it again because it's always the same thing, it's not his wife that comes home at the end of the day when he's at home, it's his mom.
Yeah.
And that won't work. It just, again, eventually, I hate to say it, I'm not excusing it, but these guys who are still males don't want to have sex with their mothers, so they usually, as she's working 2 jobs, typical story, find out 3 years later, a year later or whatever, at one point that he's had an affair going on with a girl next door for 3 years because he's still a man and he still wants to connect that way, but he can't do it with her. Well, I think that's really important to bring up all the time.
Oh, you can't say that too much. It's impossible.
Right. So, but like, ladies, this is it, right? Like, if you're going to be the badass, if you're going to act like a male and decide that you're in charge of your household, your husband, and your kids, chances are eventually somebody's going to stray, either you or him. Typically him, because he has the time to do it. You are working all the time. Is that worth it? The betrayed on the heart, after working all these years. I can't believe that I hear that story all the time. Well, sorry.
Yeah. So going back to this guy that had the chutzpah to get rid of the girlfriend, who essentially was telling him how to think. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And he said in this interview, quote, he says, "I don't know how we ended up together. It was a very short relationship. We were walking down the road and she was talking about how good the Gillette advertisement was. And we talked about, remember that, about toxic masculinity. And she thought that was great. I just looked at her and went, bye. Sorry, I can't do this with you."
Good for him.
Yeah. So here's the most important part that comes after that. He said, when a woman starts speaking to you like that, you need to run. She's literally giving you 2 very strong hints that she's about to make your life miserable. Yeah. Now, and I wrote a piece arguing that if every man would follow suit, just imagine how much more power they would have over their own lives, and that would ultimately give them an option, at least an opportunity, to go find a woman who is not like that. Yeah. You need to wake up and know that when you're being told how to think, and that in order to think this way, that makes you woke or that makes you progressive and supportive, and that's how you're supposed to think. To run, you need to run. And I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing the opposite. I'm seeing them clamoring on and just happily standing next to them, smiling, giving up their own dreams even in order to appear woke. It's making me crazy. Yeah. And so when this guy did this, it's always an opportunity when an actor does something, because of course that gets so much more attention than just us regular folk. So I always jump on it to use it,
right?
Because everyone's heard the statement or whatever. So there's only one of him. There needs to be a million.
Well, and I collect these guys, by the way. I have a friend who lives actually closer to you, is in Michigan somewhere. Mm-hmm. And good old boy, married for 10 years, 40 some years old, was raised by his mama and her mother and his aunts. So no male influence at all, completely overpowered by strong women. He'll say his way, that way. And was raised to be a good boy and sensitive and kind and loving and supporting, and just it's all about her. It's all about her. It's all about, again, that's fine, right, to a degree. But you can't bend over and completely lose yourself. And she's more important than you are, right? Forget what you want. It's all about her.
And if the husband or the father doesn't, if he's absent, obviously that's a problem. But if he's home and he doesn't step in to say, no, wait a minute,
same thing.
Yeah, same thing.
Right. So, but he had no daddy influence at all. So he did everything right. He found a girl who he loved and provided for her. And he did everything he was taught. He was sweet. He was sensitive. He was talkative. He was all about her pleasure, her support, what she wanted. Did everything by the book. And 10 years later, she's like, you know what? This really sucks, and I'm leaving. And he never saw it coming. He did everything. When she was crying, he would hold her, and he did everything loving that you could possibly do. And it went to crap, and he was more feminine because he was raised that way. He took it harder than most guys would. Blindsided, first of all, and how do you have your marriage or your woman leave you when you're doing everything right?
Yeah.
Right?
Because he doesn't know he's doing everything wrong. He doesn't know he's doing everything wrong.
So he started a movement called the Alpha Shift. You could check it out online. And he's basically teaching young males to sort of stand up, not even stand up, to own themselves, own their stuff. The Alpha Shift.
Alpha Shift. Oh, I love it.
David Kruger, great guy, but he became David as we know him today by crashing and burning and doing exactly what this culture is trying to force men into and shame them out of being masculine in the name of it's better. We're woke. This is the new way. This is what should have been this whole time. If women run the show, it's better. Wars are over. No, nothing gets done in my world.
Right.
If you put women in charge, nothing gets done. Look what's happening in Congress. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Don't be getting me going. But my point is, so he basically lived that narrative.
Dynamic, yeah.
The narrative of the women know better and being anyway, and he almost didn't make it. That's how hurt he was. But now he's teaching. So I collect these guys. I have a collection of these men who, like me, are kind of bringing back this is really not going to work ever. This is actually dangerous for everyone. It's destroying the culture. It's destroying marriages. It's destroying society as we know it. It's, because when you destroy marriages, you destroy the kids in the marriages who now cannot typically, or they have no role model for healthy relationships and what works. So they give up on that as well. And there goes an entire
family
culture. So right. So
the fallout, the domino effect is just enormous
as we know it. Right. So, so I'm happy to say that a lot of people are throwing the shifts in, and there's a lot who have no clue who are stepping into it. Right. So that's the millennials, I think, are the most vulnerable because they actually bought into it, straight up. And they like the women are telling them, this is the new way. This is the better way. Right. Yeah. So, but they really ultimately are shamed out of their masculinity. They're shamed out of their power. They're shamed out of stepping up. They're shamed out of being solid. They're shamed out of building their character. They're shamed out of their strength. And it's not strength and masculinity that's the power. It's appropriate use of both. So.
Bam. So we've spent a lot of time actually the last few podcast talking about men and their role in it and how they can do it differently or think outside the box. And I want to do something a little differently next week where we turn it more on women, which it typically is. That's more common. But since we've been so heavy on the emasculation in the men, I want to talk about women's role in this. So let's save that for next week. Is there any last thing you'd like to say before we sign off here?
It's a never-ending conversation as far as I'm concerned. I spend my days having these conversations with people, women. Men as well. And what's happening is the guys. We talked about the guys who bought into this and are really fighting the system, like the women, the feminists are, which is whatever. But I see a lot of the guys who just watch. They just watch. Yes. They just watch. They're not. And so I had an event a few weeks ago, a mastermind where I was introduced as whatever. It's a mastermind. So who I am, what I do in the world, blah, blah, blah. And, talked about this whole paradigm of, anti-masculinity. So, and just a small introduction. It was a quick little, we took a break and I was on my phone and I looked up at one point and I'm surrounded with men. There's 10 guys around my table looking at me. As I looked up, I'm like, oh, hey. And they're like, so how do you do that? You're saying the things that are in my head. How do I tell my girlfriend to chill the hell out? How do I tell her to stop pushing me around? How do I say no? Right? I'm like, oh God. But I mean, it was amazing. Nobody talks about it, but I pushed the button, I opened the door, and I was on a break. I'm surrounded by men. Tell me more. How do you do this? You're talking about the things that are in my head that I don't know what to do with. I think it's a silent killer. I really do. Yeah. Well, because they don't even have the right in their minds to even have a voice about this. And go, I think that's bullshit. Can we talk about it? Yeah, exactly. They can't even say that. They can't even say that. So they come at me. Yeah. Well, sure. They're going to be more, you're better than I am in that regard just for being male because they're going to feel more comfortable. Mostly my conversations with them wind up going, how can I get my wife to read your stuff? And how can I secretly place this by her bedside? But that's and so man to man is so important on this subject for sure, which is why I focus so much on women, because I think that this same sex telling the other same sex about this stuff is more effective. Yeah, no, seemingly so. And, I tell the guys who say, the idea of sneak your book by her bedside to maybe she'll read it, I understand if you've been shamed of being masculine and you can't even bring something like that up. There's a problem, right? Because I would say, honey, there are things going on that I don't really understand and really not working for me. And this woman seems to really have the pulse on what it feels like to me. So can you read this and we have a conversation about this, right? That's what a man would do. So if afraid to even put the book next to a pillow, hoping she'll read it, dude, you have a bigger problem already. Can you check this out? It's important for me and for us. Right? If you can't say, look, can you read this for me, please? I think it's important for me and for us. Yes, right. There's stuff here that I'm recognizing that's not working, and I'm worried about us. I mean, think about how many wives ask their husbands to read, myself included. You got to check this out. You got to check this out. Right? Why can't it go in the reverse? Right. Because you tell me I'm doing it wrong? Yeah, right? Exactly. It's offended, and of course he's trying to keep the peace because nobody wants that energy. But dude, this is when you become the rock. This is when you become solid. This is when you go, I want you to do this. For us, please. We'll talk later. I like that. Not that hard. No, it's not. I mean, it is for some, and that's what makes it sad, but it is not hard. Okay, so that wraps up today. We will pick this up next week from a different angle. You got it. Well, that wraps up another edition of the Suzanne Venker Show. Don't forget to tune in next week when Andre and I talk once again about the state of men and women in America today. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. And if you have a question or a comment for me, go to Suzanne at thesuzannevenkershow.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great week.